Gildan Media, a division of Recorded Books, presents How to Present to Absolutely Anyone. Confident Public Speaking and Presenting in Every Situation, by Mark Rhodes, narrated by Kleinman. Forward. I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with Mark for a number of years. I'm delighted to contribute to the foreword on how to present to absolutely anyone. On many occasions in the past, I've invited Mark to speak at events, more predominantly whilst he was one of the millionaire mentors on the EBA with James Caan. Unfailingly articulate and engaging as a speaker, Mark has always managed to entertain and inform his audience, keeping the room fully focused on his message at any time. On a personal level, I was once amazed when he told me of his past fear of public speaking. His delivery has always been so relaxed and confident, drawing the audience in. I'd never have believed he had endured years of fear in this area. This is why this book is just so good. It's a pocket-sized testament to Mark's journey, packed with information, advice, and Mark's experiences which will assist the reader in their own journey to perfect presentations. It's quite possibly the only presenting book you will ever need. Bev James, best-selling author of Do It or Ditch It, and CEO of the Coaching Academy. 1. How to deliver presentations without fear that you and your audience will love and you'll enjoy doing. I know this chapter title probably sounds like quite a big claim right now, but this book is about a process and system that I've developed over the last 8 to 10 years, where I've managed to take myself from somebody who'd never do a talk or presentation anywhere to someone who is now in demand around the world as a speaker and who always gets great reviews and feedback from the audience and the event organizers. But more importantly, I never get nervous these days and actually look forward to doing presentations and talks. Now, I know many of you reading this won't necessarily be aiming for a career in public speaking or being a paid speaker as such. You just want to add the skills of speaking and presenting to what you already do. There can be nothing better than being able to stand up in front of a room of people and deliver a message that inspires or motivates people, or maybe a message that gets people interested in what you or your organization does. A message you hope will get the audience to take some action afterwards and perhaps even engage with you in a transaction or on some other level. Being able to do this can also make you the envy of your peers and associates, because so many people in the world would never do what you're about to be able to do. The ability to confidently deliver a message to a group of people is empowering. After all, great speeches in history have moved millions of people and created a future very different to how it would have been without those speeches. As I write this, I'm reminded of 2 speaking engagements that I did recently on the exact same topic. One was on a Monday, and the other was the very next day on the Tuesday. At the event on the Tuesday, when I was introduced, the audience applauded and looked excited for me to be there, despite the fact that they had not met me before, and they didn't even know an external speaker was going to present to them that day at their event. It was a very different experience to the day before, the Monday, when after being introduced, I walked to the front of the room in silence, no applause, just deadly silence. What is even more interesting about this experience is that the Monday group had heard me speak to them 5 months before. They had loved my presentation so much that they had to get me back again to share even more with them, and yet there was no applause as I went up to the front of the room. Why was this? After all, you could understand if it had happened the other way around. A crowd that had heard me before and loved me had given me a huge applause, and the Tuesday group who'd never met me had just stayed quiet. Interesting. Well, in fact, the difference was, quite simply, how I was introduced. Both introductions were very short, but the words used and the tonality used were very different. The introductions were very short presentations themselves, with very different outcomes, despite being about the same topic, me. At the Monday event, when it came to my slot, the person introducing me simply said in a monotone voice, "Mark spoke back in July and has come back today to share more with us. so I will now hand you over to Mark. At the Tuesday event, the person introducing me said in an excited voice, "Really pleased Mark is here today to share ideas on transformational leadership. Please give a warm welcome to Mark." So a different tonality and a few different words, hand over to Mark versus a warm welcome to Mark, these 4 or 5 words and how they were said made the difference between 80 people clapping and looking excited and 80 people sitting in a deadly silence. A lot of presentations and talks that people deliver have their whole 30 or 60 minutes delivered like that Monday introduction. A much smaller percentage of presentations are delivered with the words and tonality that move people in unimaginable ways. So this is why public speaking and doing it correctly is so powerful and so important, not to mention rewarding. Now, when I say doing it correctly, I don't mean there are 101 tips coming up in this book on what to do and what not to do when you are at the front of a room delivering a message. What you have here is a process and way of developing yourself and your content so that delivering content or a message is easy and the audience are always engaged with both you and your content. Everywhere I go and deliver my own presentations, I hear from so many people who want to develop this skill further and get better at doing this, both from the standpoint of reducing their fear, if they've got fear, and of getting better results from the presentations that they do. In my experience, people want to deliver a presentation that they are going to look forward to delivering and that they know the audience is going to like, enjoy, and get value from. I've heard it said that when people are surveyed about their biggest fears, the fear of public speaking ranks higher than the fear of death. And I also heard somebody once say that this means that at a funeral, most people would rather be in the box going in the ground than standing at the top reading the eulogy. Now, I'm sure it's not that bad. I'm sure none of us would actually wish that in reality, although it might feel like that when the dreaded fear and feelings of impending doom strike when it's not something you're comfortable doing. So I've written this book for all those people who tell me they want to be able to present with confidence, like I do, and know the steps I take to be able to deliver great presentations. When I ask what stage they're at with public speaking, I realize most of the time that they are far more advanced than I was when I started out doing presentations. I'm not sure it is possible for anyone to be more scared than I once was. Because they are far more advanced than I was, I know that I can easily help them to fast-track what they're doing and to get far better than they currently are and far better results than they're currently getting. And that's the reason I've decided to put down everything I know, have done, and continue to do in this book. This book is also for you even if you've never done a presentation before. There are also free videos to support this book, which you can access at markrhodes.com/public-speaking-videos. How did I start out with presentations and overcome my own fears? I was desperate. I'd spent years fearing presentations and done some pretty extreme things to avoid them, even to the point where I once faked a car accident to make an excuse for not attending a meeting where I was due to give one. More on that a little later. I knew that something had to change, that I had to master this, that I'd spent too many years running away from presentations, making excuses, and it was something that I needed to do. I realized that I'd had success in other parts of my life. I'd even started, grown, and sold a business successfully, and yet I was still running away from doing presentations with dread and fear. And I then figured it out. I figured out what I needed to do in order to reduce the fear and in order to develop great content. So much so that today I just love it. I absolutely love public speaking. I don't even get nervous anymore. This has led me to speaking on many big stages around the world. I've spoken in Hong Kong, Dubai, the USA, countries across Europe. So many places. I've spoken for major well-known brands and received amazing feedback and testimonials. Again, This is just to show you how far I've come from the person who was too scared to do a talk and didn't know the first step in putting a talk together. I've had 2 books published by a major publisher and out in the shops. I've also been featured in lots of press and media, and all this has come about because of my speaking. My speaking has led to everything else. I know that you might not be looking to become a speaker or write books, but I'm sharing this with you to show you the extent of the changes I've made from somebody who was totally fearful of doing presentations to someone who's in demand as a speaker. I'm sharing this with you in a way to get you to believe that you too can get better at public speaking and presentations. You can reduce that fear. You can develop that content that you and your audience will love. Do not think for 1 minute that you're just not the sort of person to do this, because no matter where you are with your own public speaking skills or confidence levels, I'm sure, as I said earlier, you are further on than I was when I started out. So how did I do it? How bad was I? And how did I make that transformation? Let's start with how bad I was. On leaving college, I got my first job in a firm of accountants. I'd been there for about 6 months when the manager said to me, "Mark, the supervisor is off today. You need to go to head office and represent our office. And at the meeting, you're going to be in a room of about 12 people, and you're going to have to stand up for about a minute and read out from this sheet of paper what we've been doing in our office." And I thought, that's it. I'm not doing that. Absolutely no way. I'm not standing up and doing a talk. You can forget that. But then I realized pretty quickly that when your boss tells you you've got to do something, you've probably got to do it. And not only that, I was only 18. It was my first job after leaving college, so I thought, I better do this. So I set off to head office in my car on this dreadful day. The closer I got to the venue, the hotter I got. The fear was getting worse and worse the closer I got to the venue. I got about 100 yards from that building and I thought, I can't do this. There's absolutely no way. I can't do this. I'm not going. Then I had a brilliant idea. I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll tell them I've had an accident in the car and I'll have to miss the meeting because I've got to wait for the police. So that's what I did. We didn't have mobile phones or cell phones in those days, so I went to the nearest phone box. I phoned up the office and said, "I'm really sorry. Somebody has hit my car. I've got to wait for the police. I'm not going to be able to make the meeting." They said, "Don't worry, Mark. The important thing is, are you safe? Are you okay?" I was feeling a bit guilty at this point for lying to my employer and the fact that they were worrying about my safety when there was absolutely nothing wrong with me, other than the complete fear of doing that 1-minute talk, of course. They told me to sort things out and then go home, and they'd see me tomorrow at the office, and I wasn't to worry about missing the meeting. Result? When I got back home, I went through 2 phases. The first, that I was really happy, really excited, really proud of myself because I'd yet again got out of doing a talk or speaking in public. The next phase I went through was, oh no, when I go into work tomorrow they will see that there's nothing wrong with my car. I then had to go out with a hammer and break the back lights on my own car just to create evidence of the so-called accident that never happened. That's how scared I was and the extent I would go to so I could avoid doing a 1-minute presentation in public to a room of 12 people. That's how bad I was at speaking in public. But these days I will stand on a stage for an hour plus with 1,000 people or more in the audience, no slides, and I'll love every single minute of it. In fact, when I look down at my stopwatch and see I've only got 5 minutes left of my time on stage, I'm disappointed it's going to be over so soon. So, what changed? What changed to make me go from one extreme to the other? 2. My change from extreme public speaking fear to total confidence. After I achieved my success in business, I was completely astounded that I'd managed it, building a company and eventually selling it to a large Silicon Valley organization in the USA. I then got curious about success and how I'd become successful. I read a number of books, I went on some courses, and I realized most of the things I was reading or hearing I'd already been doing naturally, but in my own way, which had also led to my success so far. What I also realized is that there were some things in my life that I was doing really, really well, like sales. I was always good at selling and winning new business, and yet there were other things in my life I was doing badly, or not at all, like public speaking. I eventually realized that the difference between these two things, as soft and simple as it might sound, was how I was thinking about them. I was thinking about them very differently. You see, when I was going to a sales meeting to see a potential client or customer, I'd be thinking about everything going right. My excited and upbeat internal voice and thinking was something along the lines of, "They're going to love what we do. I can't wait to get there. I can't wait to tell them about our product, about our team. They're going to love us. They're going to want to work with us. They're going to see that we can transform their business and help them go to another level." That was my thought process, and thinking like that, I felt pretty good when I arrived at those meetings, and I therefore got excellent results most of the time, and my sales conversion or winning rate was very high. Now, when it came to giving a talk, and somebody said, "Mark, will you do a talk? Will you do a presentation?" Instead of thinking about everything going right, I'd think about everything going wrong. I'd think, maybe I'll forget my words, maybe I'll look nervous, maybe the audience won't like it, maybe I'll pass out. And after I've thought about these fears and talked to myself with my internal voice in a very down and depressed tonality, well, I'm scared. I'm smashing up that car and I'm not going to do a presentation anywhere. This was the eureka moment for me. When I saw firsthand from my own experiences how the thoughts we have and how we think about things beforehand have a major impact on the results we get and how we feel during the process, no matter what we're doing. I then started to change how I was thinking about giving presentations, and I would think more about things going right than things going wrong, and that's when the fear started to diminish for me. I will explain exactly how I made this change as we go through this book. The fear diminished to a stage that I managed to put myself on a course. It wasn't a public speaking course, but it was a course where I'd have to stand up and do a short presentation each day about what we had learnt that day. Because I'd started thinking about things going well with these presentations, imagining myself delivering those talks well, it started to reduce the fear to the point that I'd go on the course and take part in it. Then the ongoing practice beyond that is what helped me go much further. In addition to reducing my fears, I'd also come up with ways to develop content and methods of delivery as well as everything else that I'm going to take you through in what I call my Zero to Hero in Public Speaking process. Discovering another way by accident. I found out something very interesting some years later when I started helping clients with public speaking and overcoming their own fears, something that made me totally change my original approach. What I used to do was start by sorting out their mindset and helping them reduce the fears that were holding them back. I would say to them at the start of our first coaching session, "How scared are you on a 0 to 10 scale?" Where 0 is I could do a talk right now to 1,000 people. It would be a walk in the park and I'd love every single minute of it. And 10 would be, if I stand up to do a talk, I know I'm going to die. Now, because 10 is, I know I'm going to die, and they know they won't actually die, the most they can choose is 9. Although some jokingly still say 10. But hey, if they're joking now, they're not taking it so seriously is often my response, and I tell them they have already made progress. If they'd been thinking that they were at a fear level of 10 before our conversation, then I've got an improvement for them already. Do remember, though, that when thinking about this fear level for yourself, the scale and judgment of fear level from 0 to 10 is your own personal measurement and only yours. You can't compare it to anyone else. Your 7 may be their 9. It is your personal relative scale, so when you check again on another day, You will know you have improved if your number is reduced when you think about speaking in public. But whatever their number was, 7, 8, 9, or whatever on the scale, I would then start to use different techniques to reduce that fear level. Once we'd got their fear level down by various methods to a lower and more manageable number, maybe a 4 or 5, we would then start looking at other areas such as content, delivery style, engaging the audience, etc. Incidentally, this technique of taking our own personal measurement of the level of fear we feel in a given situation is based on the SUD scale concept. SUD stands for Subjective Unit of Distress. The D is also sometimes taken to mean disturbance or discomfort. The SUD method was developed by Joseph Wolpe back in 1969. The Great Discovery. What I found a couple of years ago was that I could also do this the other way around. Instead of dealing with their fears first, I could start by looking at their topics and content first. I realized that a lot of the fears and concerns someone had would massively reduce or go away totally if they knew they had a really exciting and interesting presentation to deliver, that the audience were going to love it, and that they weren't going to make any big mistakes. It would also be even better if they had safety nets in place to make sure that there wouldn't be any major mistakes or, in the very unlikely situation of something going wrong, that they had a simple strategy or way of dealing with it. So, as an example, here is something that happened with one of my clients that led me to this realization, that starting with content and delivery style as opposed to the fears also worked brilliantly. I was asked to go and do some one-to-one coaching to help a young lady who wanted to get better at public speaking. When she first contacted me, her whole focus was about reducing the fear she had. She said to me, "Mark, I just lack confidence. I've got no confidence to speak in public, and yet I've got to do this big presentation that's coming up." She explained that she was going to be doing her presentation to about 60 to 80 architects who she said were on average in their 50s with many years of experience, whereas she was a young woman of about 30. I wasn't sure at this stage what the issue was, but it sounded like this in itself was a problem for her. When we met, I said my usual, "So tell me on a scale of 0 to 10 how scared you are of doing this presentation, where 0 is it's a walk in the park. I could do it in my sleep, and 10 is I know I'm going to die." She replied, "On a scale of 0 to 10, I'm definitely an 8. I'm definitely an 8. I said, "Okay, well, we'll come back to that in a little while." What I then proceeded to do in that session was not to focus on the fear level straight away. I would come back and deal with the fears a little later. Now, this wasn't some major moment of inspiration on my part to focus on content first. It was forced on me due to the environment we were in. You see, some of the methods of reducing fear involved some exercises being done out loud, and as we were working in an office environment, although in a private room, there were 4 glass walls, and it just didn't feel like an ideal environment for some of the dealing with fear exercises. Therefore, I just spent an hour or so with her getting the content of her presentation right. Looking at what she was thinking of saying and doing and amending and adjusting it, what those content changes actually were, I will explain later in the book. After a couple of hours, we got her content right. We got it structured. It was now going to be very easy for her to deliver the content because of the changes we had made. We also made it a lot more interesting. Again, I will cover how to make your presentations more interesting a little later. She then said, "Wow, that's going to be so exciting to deliver. I'm looking forward to delivering it already, although I'm not sure this particular audience will take me seriously." You see, now she knew that audiences in general would enjoy this new version of the presentation after all, she was starting to feel excited about delivering a presentation like this. But she still had concerns about this particular audience liking her or, as she said, taking her seriously. This meant we also had to deal with what she felt the audience's objections would be to her talking to them on this topic. I cover this later too in the section on dealing with audience objections, and explain how we solved this for her. At this stage, we hadn't done a single thing to do with her confidence, mindset, or fear levels. All we had done is to put together some really great content, making it much more interesting and easier to deliver, and sorting out the objections she felt the audience might have about her or the content. I then said to her, "So where are you now on a scale of 0 to 10? Amazingly, she said, "I'm a 3, Mark. I'm a 3. I don't think we need to do any more work. Mark, I think I can go and do this." Time and time again, I have found that when we get the content right, deal with any objections the person thinks the audience may have about them or their content, and get the person to practice, their fear is massively reduced every time they do the presentation or whenever they do any presentation. So that's why content is really, really important. But before we get into creating interesting content and dealing with what you think an audience may not like or may object to about you or your presentation, let's go through the fear mindset and confidence side of things. Now, just like an audience objection, as I write this, I've just thought of an objection some readers may have at this point in the book that I need to deal with. I've just laid out a very strong case for how improving the content and dealing with real or perceived audience objections can make the fear levels fall and the confidence levels can rise, such that dealing with these fear or confidence areas isn't always necessary, or at a minimum can be done after the content is sorted. However, I've also said I'm going to cover fears and confidence before I cover content and audience objections. Here's the thing. Especially in a book, some people won't be able to engage with getting into the content while they know they still have this high level of fear or anxiety going on. The difference with what happened to my architect client is that I was there to reassure her that I would come on to help her fears and anxiety once we had the content sorted. So why mention this other way of dealing with content first at all? Well, to reassure you that even if you still have fear or anxiety, once we have been through the mindset and confidence side of things, there is still a huge amount of progress to be made once we have also gone through the content and audience side of things. This means that if, after the next few chapters, you are still not confident you can do this, you should keep going through the rest of the book until the end. For many people, the big progress comes from a combination of the fear reduction confidence building techniques and the content creation methods. The main steps of the process. So here are the main steps. We're going to look at each of these steps in turn and in detail throughout the book, but first, as an overview, the main steps are: 1. Getting your mindset right, building confidence and reducing fear. 2. Building the motivation, enthusiasm, and desire. 3. Being yourself and dealing with mistakes. 4. Having a great in-motion start. 5. Having great content to deliver. 6. Dealing with objections that the audience might have in their mind about you or your topic. 7. Getting the audience to take action. 8. Dealing with difficult audience questions. 9. How to prepare. 10. Delivering on the day. 11. What will being better at presentations mean to you? We're going to look at each of these in the earlier order as we move through the book. Part 1. The Mindset and Confidence to Present. 3. Getting your mindset right, building confidence and reducing fear. I've already covered the fact that the first stage of this is to be aware of your thinking patterns and mindset and to start thinking about and imagining things going well, not things going badly. Remember my own discovery of how I was thinking very differently about winning business compared to how I was thinking about doing presentations. You also need to remember that fear massively reduces the more we do things. We normally experience fear because of uncertainty, and when we say that we lack confidence in doing presentations, that's why we're scared, or that's why we've got the fear, due to the uncertainty. Now, Tony Robbins, the world-famous author and motivational speaker.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?